And so, yeah, I'm very lucky that, through coincidence, through my short time comparatively in this career, that I've ended up in a wonderful place like this. And yeah, and the experience has been pretty tremendous. I mean, I never thought in a million years I would be working in a house like this, let alone in ballet, which,
Yeah.
I had never really experienced in a professional, as someone working in it. I had never thought of that. And yeah, and so I mean, every day is a growing experience, and I'm taking every moment I can and soaking it in.
Good morning, Edo. It's so lovely to see you again and to talk on Zoom.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, so the last time we met was over a nice coffee in Vienna, but you're back in London now at the Royal Opera House.
Yeah. I took the trek here during the strike, as we mentioned previously, and it's nice. It's a nice place to work. It could be worse. Royal Opera House.
Of course. But now you're a conductor, you're a pianist, and you're also a composer. And
That's right.
I assume you started playing the piano as a child, or where did your music career start?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of an unorthodox start, I'd say, compared to, I mean, I wouldn't even know that until I got to college. But I sort of, I'd say, noodled around on the piano. I always liked to just kind of come and make noise. So I started basically improvising, and I didn't read any music. And it wasn't until I was in high school where I had lessons and sort of started my formal music education. But of course, music was always in my house. My parents were always enormous advocates of the arts, and I would go see ballets and operas at home, or live in concerts, or music theater. I mean, endless variety of genres. And so, it's, music and art have always been part of my life, but I didn't really decide to make it my life's work until when I was in college. But I think, the early foundation was really in high school, when I took my first lessons with a guy named Alan Anderson, who was a graduate of the esteemed Juilliard, school, and he was just teaching at Northeastern University in Chicago, where my family was living at the time. And and he sort of embedded within me this sense of discipline, which I think was otherwise non-existent in my artistic life, where I was just sort of, like I said, messing around and improvising. And even when I first started with him, I would basically be trying to copy recordings because I couldn't read music properly. So I would buy a score of music that I thought I liked and put it on the piano. And then I would find my favorite recording and sort of press play, find the notes, look at the score, sort of try to associate it, and then very, very slowly sort of learn a piece that way. And when he learned I was doing this, he was not pleased. So we sort of, but anyway, but he had a lot of patience for me. And so, very gradually I learned how to read music and, sort of developed a structured way of learning and playing that I still fall back on those kind of foundational things.
Well, I love this story. I love the fact that you can do it that way because we sort of have this idea that, yes, when you start playing the piano, you have to start at the age of 4 or 5, and it's this specific route that you're taking. And I love these stories where people just say, "Hey, I just, at a very older age than the normal musicians, started, and I did this. And it's interesting also that you taught yourself this way, and that you said you just played around a little bit, but that must be part of who you are now as a musician. The fact that you had that freedom.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah. Well, first, to speak to your point about, I think, the sort of conventional wisdom of learning and advancement. I mean, and I'm not the only living proof out there, but certainly I don't adhere to that at all. I mean, even when it comes to learning languages and advancing, I mean, it's never too late. It's just a question of one's affinity and finding a way inside. And so there's that. But yeah, I think, what might be sort of an unusual thing, especially in the context of classical music, because I don't think in any way I'm individual in this, in the broader context of art, but I find that sense of freedom that I started with, I mean, it's very much part of my practice now, something I would not have necessarily thought of, or I mean, I was taking it for granted. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And now, actually, as I've kind of continued writing music and playing and conducting, I noticed that actually my practice is much more connected to that sense of freedom, or that kind of desire to explore and to question and to seek that kind of feeling of like, whoa, what is this? I want to dig into this more. And I really like that. I mean, and I'm sort of drawn to other artists that do the same kind of thing. And so I have this sort of, like all of us, we have that kind of community of influences built within us. And mine just happened to be, from a pretty far reaching, diverse array of genres and specialties, ranging from, everything from, like we were saying, dance or free jazz or noise music, and that sort of thing. One moment. Sorry, I have room reserved. Thank you.
I'm in it 11. Okay. That's fine.
Sorry. And so building that kind of inner community of influence, of inspiration, I think, for me, is part of that kind of structured part within the freedom. It's just that, you're always drawing on the early days, but then building kind of a sort of mythology, an inner mythology within yourself to like draw from when you're making stuff. So.
Yeah, and it's also now interesting what you're saying, because I think what I've heard from many young musicians also is that they have there's this idea of you have to do competitions to get you to the next level, or to be known, and yet you have not done it that way. You've done it in a very unconventional way, and you are working now in one of the most well-known houses in the world, the Royal Opera House, isn't it?
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Well, yeah, I think it's a very interesting, again, convention or sort of accepted norm within artistic communities, especially within classical music, that competitions have sort of become a beacon or a bellwether through which people are sort of discovered or make a name for themselves. And I have no desire to be part of that. I tried once, and I have applied to, like, a couple of the bigger competitions in the past for conducting in particular. But to be honest, I think this is sort of antithetical to the practice of art. And
Yeah.
there are so many artists, like historically, who had no connection to this kind of approach. Some did, but I mean, there's an old joke, or to me, it's an old joke anyway. I mean, how many master's degrees does Beethoven have, or how many competitions did Cecil Taylor win, or one of these big names? I mean, it's for me, it's so much more about a life and building a creative life around what you do. And my old conducting teacher, who I'm still very close with, I mean, he always tells me, listen, do the work, do it well. You can't stop good work. That's the proof is there. And so, yeah, I'm very lucky that, through coincidence, through my short time comparatively in this career, that I've ended up in a wonderful place like this. And yeah, and the experience has been pretty tremendous. I mean, I never thought in a million years I would be working in a house like this, let alone in ballet, which, I
Yeah.
I had never really experienced in a professional, as someone working in it. I had never thought of that. And yeah, and so I mean, every day is a growing experience, and I'm taking every moment I can and soaking it in. Yeah.
But do you think also that this has made you more daring in the sense that you um, take on things that you just think, hey, I can do it, or that you come
Hmm.
from that idea from where you had that freedom, but then it gives you sort of a perception of what you are capable of.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the origins of my self-motivation. I do have uh, a very strong will. So like if I find myself drawn to something just on my own time, I'll absolutely dedicate a lot of time to it. And for example, I mean, as we speak, I mean, you know, I'm trying to put together some concerts in London just with some friends, and with some pretty ambitious repertoire, I think, which totally feels normal to me. But I think, well, from what I gather from sharing my experience with other people, they find this kind of startling that, where do you find the time to put those concerts together, to do your job here, and and then to compose, and I I don't know the origins of that. I just think that we're all capable of doing that if we want to, and I think the secret is just, I mean, maybe like, I don't know, maybe this is a pathological thing, maybe it's a talent, it's in itself, but like, I think that curiosity and the will to push towards it and to work towards that. I mean, I think that's sort of the reward in of itself. And maybe that's what, the vision of that realization of those
Yeah.
goals is sort of what motivates me. So I don't know the origins of that, but it definitely pulls me through from one thing
Mm.
to the next. So, um,
Amazing. Yeah. But now tell me about ballet conducting, because that's always
mhm.
very interesting to me. And how did you find, or how did you get yourself to be a ballet conductor?
Oh, well, I was living in Paris at the time, and I saw that the Royal Opera House, they have these different programs, that they sort of search for assistant conductors, and I saw that they were looking for a ballet conductor person, or a pianist for that matter, and it sort of piqued my interest, and I submitted. And when I first of all, I never thought I would ever get an audition, but I I did, and when I received notice that they were inviting me, I was like, oh, I really need to do some research what this is actually about. And so, I started watching a lot of ballets, reviewing mostly a lot of the old films that I used to watch as a kid, whether it was like the Cinderella that Guy Marin did in Lyon, or watching, productions of The Prince of the Pagodas or Spartacus. These are, for me, their childhood memories as much as anything. And so just reviewing like what the intricacies are, and that sort of thing. And then I had this audition, which was absolutely the most fun I've ever had in an audition. It was this multi-round thing. And one of the things we had to do was actually work with dancers. They sort of had a workshop situation. We had the Swan Lake, the White Swan Pas de Deux, which, Prince Siegfried meets Odile for the first time. And when he's in the woods with his crossbow and all that. And we just did a workshop basically on this. We had two to prepare. There was that one and the Rose Adage from Sleeping Beauty. And so anyway, but we've primarily focused on the Swan Lake, White Swan, and the working together. So the sort of experienced guy I think he's the principal conductor in the Birmingham Royal Ballet, sort of walked us through what to watch for and whatever. And I just had a blast. I just had a great time, and I sort of attached it to some of my, my training as a new music person, which is how I got into conducting in the first place, doing contemporary music, and then opera, which I had done professionally before. But this was different in the sense that you really had to watch. You couldn't just rely on your ears as one is accustomed to as a musician. And so, but it was just really exciting and it was fun, and I took to it, and I just had fun. And then to my delight, they said, "Oh, well, it seems like you're." So they took me in and they said, "Oh, you must have had a experience doing ballet before." And I was like, "Oh yeah, totally. I absolutely." Which not advisable necessarily to lie in an audition, but fake it till you make it. That's the American way. What can I say? But no, but in this case, it worked out very well, and I'm like I said, I'm very lucky. And every day is a learning experience. I mean, I've gotten now to do, oh gosh, I don't know how many, so 7 productions last year, 7 productions. So like, yeah, 14. I'm covering shows. So, which means I'm like the assistant for, for all the main stage shows. And then, for some pieces, especially the new creations, you usually get more involved. And in some of the kind of repertoire pieces, you're more a fly on the wall, but you really get to absorb the music and see the ins and outs of the particular production. So it's a very exciting thing.
But you're working with a great team. I mean, Paul Murphy and Koen Kessels.
Oh yeah,
and Jonathan Lowe.
That's right. Yeah. No, they're wonderful colleagues. Actually, Paul was the person in the story I was referring to. He's a really, really lovely man, and Kuhn. I mean, I've learned a lot from assisting him and just talking to him about the repertoire and about the world of ballet. Not just conducting it, but the whole scheme of it, from the short period of the Diaghilev ballets and the creation of like the Tchaikovsky ballets in collaboration with like Petit Pas, like it's Sleeping Beauty, and I mean the list would be endless if I were to list for you. Yeah.
Well, I did an interview with Koen Kessels during lockdown, and I was just absolutely amazed at how much insight he really has into dancers, and they're just. I mean, it's amazing, and I think it must be the time that he works with them. All these years that he's worked with ballet dancers. Do you find also that you have now a different way of seeing or looking at ballet, and a different appreciation for what the dancers are doing?
Oh, well, the appreciation, absolutely. Like, I mean, at first, when you first come into a studio, you're sort of watching these, living statues, which look like, Greek sculptures, just doing these seemingly impossible things. You don't even know where to begin to understand what you're looking at. And very gradually, you start to kind of get past the initial awe, and you begin to understand the technique, and you learn the names of the moves as well. You engage with the meaning of what they're doing and see how it's actually reflecting often some kind of story, or certainly some inexpressive inexpressive element. And and that took a long time, actually. I would say, I mean, every day still I'm learning a new way of understanding what I'm seeing. And also, I will say this, to understand the way in which they are listening to the music, because they have a very strong but unique relationship to sound. And everyone anyway has a very individual way of listening. But dancers, just by training and by the way that they connect uh, physicality, movement to sound, I think gives them a very, very particular way of listening that uh, I think is very special and different. So that takes a long time just to
Yeah.
realize, let alone start to get into. And as far as working with dancers, I mean, that's also a process of discovery. I mean, again, everyone's an individual, so everyone has their own peculiarities, the things they like to do. Some people like you to lead more in the sound. Some people like that you follow them more. Some people need more space, less space, faster, slower. Everyone's different, has a different body, and so different things that come out. Everyone feels the beat of the music in a different place. So depending on where they feel it, they'll want certain moments of the music to come at certain places. It's a very fascinating and unique thing. But I have to say, it's another way for us as conductors, or musicians, to understand music as well. I mean, conducting anyway is relatable to dance, sort of in a
Mhm.
one-to-one way. I mean, we're sort of interpretive dancing in front of an orchestra. So it's a very worthwhile and fulfilling pursuit, and gives a different side to art making.
But it's also not something that all conductors can do automatically. I think some conductors do opera, and so it's not automatic that you're a conductor, so you can do ballet conducting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the culture also. you know I mean, I think conventionally you're absolutely right, especially in the western part of the world. uh, Ballet is pretty niche. And so, on the occasion where a conductor will do music from a ballet, it'll be in a concert context, or it'll be a snippet from Nutcracker, usually,
Mm.
and that's it. And that, I think, has to do again with the way that you're able to relate to, what the dancers have to do. Knowing that, oh, well, right there, they're doing a particular kind of lift, or doing, you know, a particular kind of jump, or, oh, there's a manège there, or, oh, she wants more time on the arabesque. Like, I mean, that changes how you have to think of the phrasing in order to work together, and it's not so much being tied to what's happening on stage, because I think one of the things that does sort of cause some consternation among conductors is, oh, well, I can't have my own interpretation. It's like, no, you can. You're working with someone. It's like when you're playing chamber music with somebody or improvising with somebody. The whole point is to listen to them too. It's not just about your ideas. So I quite welcome the collaboration with what's happening on stage. And so, and very often, I mean, like with any collaborative experience, it only enhances the ideas we have anyway. It pulls you in a new direction. But as far as the nicheness of the ballet conducting, I mean, I think there are some cultures in which it's sort of part of the métier, it's part of the genre of conducting. I mean, my understanding is in Russian training, for example, you know, if you're a conductor, you're a conductor, and that means you should be able to do all these
Oh, I see.
different things, whether it's choral conducting or ballet conducting. But absolutely, it's true. I mean, you know, in the US, for example, where I did most of my studies, um, oh yeah, like I mean, it never would have occurred to me.
Mm.
Never, because it's not part of your education. I mean, there's opera next door to you, right? You
Yeah.
have singer friends, you're, you know, as a pianist, you're working with them. It's always part of the, you know, the social circle. It's in your ear. But ballet is, you know, they have their own schools, they're sort of
Mm.
separated from everything. And unless you're in a training program, like, you know, the Constant Lambert, like, you know, the Yeti Parker, um, you're not necessarily going to have that connection and the training to be comfortable with it. And I think that's sort of where the discomfort is. It's because I find actually, in terms of waving your hands and working with an orchestra, that part of it is the same. Where the difference begins is your sense of musicality has to be more flexible, adapting to a particular production or the needs of the dancers. And moreover, it's about being open to, you know, the, let's say, the visualization or the movement associated with the sound and the communication. That's really what I wanted to say. It's the communication, because there's a very different way of speaking about the music. Because again, many dancers, some absolutely have a great, you know, understanding of jargon of music, but many don't, though they're very musical people. And so you have to find a way to communicate and
Oh, yeah.
understand even just where you are in the music. And so that, I think, is really where the training is extremely useful, and understanding that there is a different process at work here, and there are new possibilities in the music that is not necessarily intuitively part of the musical training.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, but it makes it very exciting to
Mm.
work together.
But you're also a composer.
Yes.
And how does this influence your work now? That
Oh,
you
interesting.
suddenly have to do with movement as well. You know,
Yeah.
that's part of your life now.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's true. Well, there is a long tradition of movement-based sound making. I'm reading a book now on, it's called Forces in Motion, about Anthony Braxton. He happens to be coming to London soon, and I'm very excited about seeing his concert. So I thought I'd read this kind of biography about him. And I mean, even in that creative music circle, what he calls, basically, it's like the community of improvisers and seeking alternative kinds of ways to structure music and that kind of thing. But you know, he has a chart of just the visualizations of different kinds of sounds, and, like, you know, and how that movements themselves can be used in pieces. I mean, I think about also, like, you know, Peter Ablinger and his Augenmusik kind of thing, which is like, again, visualization of sound, and even some pieces where you're just meant to look at them, you know, and just whatever sound you have in your head, that's like the piece. So there is some, you know, precedent for that kind of association. In my particular case, it's influenced me in, let's say, a more concrete way. In that, I mean, I'm writing a ballet for the first time. I mean, it's a
Really?
modern dance. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's okay. So short piece. like, let's say, the goal is like maybe a 30-minute something. I'm working together with a wonderful dancer here, Calvin Richardson, who's also a fantastic choreographer. And we're really working collaboratively, starting from the movement itself. Um, and we've been talking about this for, I mean, upwards of a year now. Um, but basically, I came to him with this idea, that I took from Lucia Długoszewski, who was a Polish American composer and choreographer who was married to a choreographer called Ethan. No, it's not Ethan. Eric Hawkins, who was a sort of one of the students or proteges of Martha Graham, who founded his own dance company. Sort of not super well known, a bit more obscure. But I was very drawn to Lucia Długoszewski's kind of process that she created around designing music or sound environments from movement. And so that was the premise of starting to work together and experimenting and conceptualizing more than anything. And we're starting now to finally find material, let's say,
Okay.
to actually make the piece. So it's a very, very slow, gradual process. And I have to say, it's very exciting because Calvin sort of invited me into this process of choreographing as well. And likewise, I've invited him to sort of weigh in and into the process of composing. So it's a really, it's a really interesting close collaboration that, I mean, sort of speaks also to the kind of history of outside art making in a way, because I mean, we both have our individual expertise, but to invite the other
Ah,
into that expertise to
mhm.
contribute it, I think is a really unique thing. And so yeah, I mean, we are still sort of in the process of discovering exactly what the piece will be. But I mean, we've discussed such interesting, far-reaching influences, such as Alvin Lucier and the philosophy of Sartre's critique of dialectical reason, and various ideas of space and time, and just anything you can sort of think
Amazing.
of, and just yeah, slowly combining these, and and it again speaks to the influence of when you collaborate with someone with a different perspective, you suddenly discover new things.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, it's brought my composing to a new direction, because I wouldn't be able to even start to think of the ideas that I'm starting to work with, in the sound, without this kind of thing, and being able to try firsthand, which for me is very important. The idea, like you were saying, when we started talking, the idea of freedom and to experiment and to
Yeah.
explore. I mean, the hands-on part of it is very important to me. So, yeah.
I think it's amazing because now it's two types of communication that's brought together, with him with the movement and you with music. So it's wonderful that type of collaboration, because it's usually seen a bit separate, isn't it? That
Mhm.
that the choreographer takes the music, that's the way to work around. And now
Indeed.
this way it's at the same time um, a creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No, and yeah, and that's true. Yeah, normally, actually, the piece is finished or in some form, and then
yeah,
the choreographer will respond to it. Yeah, but I like working this way. It's a
yeah.
proper kind of creative endeavor where it's a process of searching. It's I'm always really drawn, as we were saying at the beginning. What draws me in to making things, making art, is sort of the same sense of awe, right? Or seeking that awe that I felt on a number of occasions, where you're in a concert or in a show or in front of a painting, sculpture, and you go, wow,
Yeah.
how is that allowed? How is that possible? And I find that, if you leave yourself open to the new experiences, even in the process of making it, you're opening yourself to get closer to that
Yeah.
feeling. And yeah, because in the end, that's sort of the point to me of
Mhm.
making things, of being creative, is to, have that aesthetic feeling uh, of just, you know, profound, awe and mystery, and being confronted by that. It's sort of like the 19th century idea of the sublime, but you're
Yeah.
faced with, you know, someone else's creation or someone else's abilities, or, you know, or your own sometimes, if you're lucky, you know, but it's a matter of being open. Yeah.
But this is what I'm was thinking also about, and mentioning about the daring, because this is something that I think, if you're always just doing the conventional things, or the things that have been done before, and that you think, okay, so this is how it should be done, but because you have not really done that, it opens you up to also trying new things, or trying different things, or things that haven't been done before. This is the daring part, that you think, okay, so I can do it, or I can go there and try it. And if it works, then great. And if it doesn't, then at least I've tried it.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think you're right, and I appreciate you saying that. I don't know that if it's because I went an unconventional path. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know the origins,
Yeah.
because it's true that, yeah, I'm absolutely, you know driven and drawn to different things without necessarily, consideration to the, let's say, normal path. But I think anyone can do it. I
Yeah.
think it's a human thing. But I think the difference is, if you're part of a system and you find immense success and gratification within that system, I think there's not a lot of incentive to look outside of it.
Yeah.
Where I think the opportunity is to discover your own way is where suddenly something isn't working for you. If you
Mm.
are sort of slightly outside, and that is sort of the beginning, or an obligatory beginning, to question or to find another way.
Mm.
And so, but I think if you're doing really well, if you're winning, let's say, competitions, and if you're getting invitations to stuff, and you're an entrenched part of an institutional
Mm.
situation, a path, then yeah, why
Yeah.
question what you're doing? You're doing
Yeah.
great. You feel great about it. People make you feel great because they're telling you you're great. There's no
Mm.
incentive to kind of find your own way. I think
And you're in
it's
your
yeah,
flow, then you're in
that's
your
right.
flow. It goes. Yeah. No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think those folks who, I mean, and there's many historical examples of this. The people who, whether individuals, collectives, communities, what have you, the ones who sort of have that moment of, what Southcliffe calls group infusion, this sort of shared collective idea of suddenly, oh, we need to move towards another, vision of reality, are usually the people who have this kind of self-conscious awakening. They say, oh, well, this
Yeah.
system isn't working for me in one way or another. Or, sometimes people are moved so much by the art they witness, or by, conversations they have with a friend, But ultimately, it's again an aesthetic thing where suddenly you have this kind of profound, or what feels to you anyway, a profound realization that something needs to change. And I think that's usually the moment where, you say, here are some other possibilities for living or for going forward. And actually, this is now that I'm thinking out loud, sort of, I mean, this is sort of the premise of even like in Foucault's kind of postmodernism in the third volume of History of Sexuality. He talks about this, doesn't it? Like what the art of life, or you know, um, or the motivation of like Sun Ra to like why he makes music and why he's interested in sounds that upset people. It's to break people out of their complacency. And and I think and so I think perhaps maybe there is something to the idea that because of my starting doing it my own way, without it wasn't my choice necessarily. That's how it started. It was by chance. Maybe there is something to that, but I do think that anybody can. I don't think I'm special in that regard. I think it's just another human thing that can happen if you're open to it.
Well, I always think of, and this is now totally, a little bit different, but I always think of Charlie Albright, the pianist, who did his concerto in Carnegie Hall. And when he did the encore, he played Great Balls of Fire. And
amazing. Yeah.
And I think that's the way to do it,
Absolutely.
To just do your thing.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Completely agree. That's
but
fantastic.
Now, Edo, tell me now, what are the wish now for the future? I know you're working on this great piece with Calvin, but what for you for the future would be great to have?
Yeah. Wow. What would I like from the future? Well, world peace would be great. But I guess in terms of my career, which is, I guess, what you mean. I would like. I mean, I would love to have my own group where we do a variety of things. Ranging from opera to ballet to contemporary music, that sort of thing. I would love to continue my, rather far-reaching compositional collaborations that I'm doing kind of ongoingly. In a sense, to continue what I'm doing now, but just, to always advance forward and to always be thinking about the community that I occupy and moving towards, like always looking for the deeper meaning in what I'm doing.
Wow, this was so inspirational to talk to you, Edo, and
my
I'm so looking forward to seeing the ballet that you're doing, that the composition and the choreography and the work that you're doing with Calvin. And but I just have one last question for you, and that is, can you do a shout out to your favorite coffee place in London?
Oh, sure.
Or your favorite restaurant?
My favorite coffee place in London. I give a shout out to Arôme, absolutely fantastic bakery and coffee place. Amazing espresso, great pastries. Can't go wrong.
Okay. Great. Okay, but Edo, have a lovely afternoon, and thank you so much for your time. And please let me know when you're in Vienna again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to talking more soon.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.